Hello and welcome to Drive Steady. This is a 1968 Corvette convertible, and in this video I'm going to tell you why it strengthened the mid-engine Corvette discussion almost 50 years ago. In 1968, Chevrolet went through an entire redesign with the Corvette, establishing what was then the C3 generation. The C3 would be the successor to the very popular C2, which was in production between 1963 and 1967 and is still widely recognized as the best Corvette ever made. And with good reason, because it gave us cars like the 1963 split-window Corvette, the Z06, and the Grand Sport race cars. The C3 definitely had big shoes to fill. It was originally planned to release as a 67 model year run, however Chevrolet experienced manufacturing challenges along with new government safety standards which pushed the C3 as a 68 model year run. When the C3 was finally released, it wasn't well accepted. Many Corvette fans criticized it for losing its performance and touted it as being a bulky boulevard cruiser. The C3 was dubbed as the shark design Corvette for these free-flowing lines and these high fenders, and in addition to that, the signature shark-style gill vents here that are functional and work to cool the engine. If you're curious as to why I'm not calling this the Stingray, and that's because Corvette didn't start calling it the Stingray until 1969. The 68 model year actually was just the 1968 Corvette. The C3 followed its C2 counterpart with a fiberglass body, featuring the elongated hood and the hammer style layout, which continues to the C7 design even today. And when you follow the car through the front, you notice these chrome style front bumpers running all the way through the front here and also in the rear, and these very popular pop-up headlights that are operated using a vacuum system. One cool design related to the headlights are that when they're tucked away, you can see the yellow housing through the front grille. These high-rise front fenders are also a hallmark of the C3 Corvette, and behind the wheel, these wheel arches immediately remind you that you're in something special. Coming to the back of this Corvette, you see this molded-in body-style spoiler, which looks very elegant and understated. And of course, you've got the quad circle featured tail lights in the Corvette, which ran all the way through until the C7, where they changed it to a little bit more of a diagonal design. And of course, in between these quad tail lights, you've got the Corvette lettering here. In addition, you've got the steel chrome bumpers, rear bumpers, to match the ones in the front, and the dual exhaust tailpipes, which look very nice but are not stock in this car. I will get to those in a little bit. One thing to notice here are these reverse tail lights, and these are separated from the tail lights up here, your turn signals. This was only in 1968. In 1969, these were moved up into the tail light and they were integrated within this bulb here. And that's the difference between the 68 and the 69, following suit all the way to the end of the generation. This is a convertible version of the C3 Corvette. However, Chevy did give you the option for a hardtop if you configured the convertible. And talking about that convertible, you can see this is a top-down version of it, and it's stored underneath this speedster cover or tonneau cover here. You open this up, and there lies your convertible nice and tucked away. Another cool feature of this C3 are the door handles and how they operate. There's a mechanism of pushing down the door latch and the keyhole that makes even the entry of this vehicle feel different and special. And the sound it makes when opening and closing the doors is very mechanical and solid feeling. From what I can remember, I haven't seen this type of door handle design in any other car. Moving to the interior of the C3, you've got the standard layout, which looks very basic when you compare it to something from today's day and age. But immediately you're greeted with this nice round steering wheel, which is very heavy when you're driving it because this car does not have power steering. And at times, it feels like you're steering a tank when you're driving this thing. The interior space for the C3 was smaller than in the C2, and the seat backs were fixed, but more of a laid-back angle, which made it look like you're sitting in a bathtub or something. Maybe the current Camaro's designer was also involved in this car. The Corvette has always been about performance through its entire heritage, and it's no different in this car here. In today's day and age, you see many manufacturers moving the batteries of their cars from the front to the rear for better weight distribution. But look at this here. In 1968, Corvette was already doing this. Look at these compartments back here. You've got, in one of these three, you've got the Optima battery sitting here. So Corvette was forward thinking in putting this battery back here for better weight distribution. Who said the 68 Corvette wasn't all about performance? Now, just because this is a 50-year-old car, it doesn't mean you can't have any technology in it. Now, the Corvette's been around for a very long time, and there are many aftermarket manufacturers for it, and it's allowed the owner of this car to upgrade the stereo. It's also got a CD changer as well. So what you can do is you can stream Bluetooth radio, and you can have an auxiliary jack, plug in your phone, and play music from there. So you can stream to your heart's content and enjoy your open-top convertible with the music that you like. I wanted to mention two interesting designs or functionality within the interior of the C3 Corvette. One is the ignition switch. It's mounted on top of the dash as opposed to being on the steering column, which became very popular eventually throughout the 70s and the 80s. Second are these things right here on top of the brake handle. The owner is actually using this as a coin slot holder. However, it's not the real intention of this, as these are really used for your belt buckles when they're not in use. It's a very clever design from Chevrolet, and these clever types of interior design I feel is lost in modern cars today. Now to the engine. In 1968, the Corvette came standard with a 5.4-liter 327 cubic inch small block V8, made it to a 3-speed manual, which was good for 300 horsepower. Other engine options included a higher output 327 and multiple versions of the big block 427. Of course, the most powerful and most popular being the RPO L88, which was advertised at 435 horsepower. But that rating was quite a joke, as it was massively underrated, and many say it had close to 560 horsepower. This is in 1968. There are cars today, sports cars in fact, that don't have that much horsepower now. But let's talk about this car's engine. Originally, this was a 5.4-liter 327, but now it's been modified with a bored and stroked Chevrolet 383 stroker engine rated at 450 horsepower and 450 foot-pounds of torque, as it's mated to a 4-speed manual transmission. It's also got some other modifications like an aftermarket intake manifold, aftermarket carburetors, headers, and exhaust. I'll give you some perspective once we get this thing on the road, but man, this thing hauls. Since we're talking about the engine, let's talk about some of the performance numbers. In 1968, Road & Track took a 68 Corvette with a 327 and a 4-speed manual and tested it. It got a 0 to 60 time of 7.7 seconds, a top speed of 127 miles per hour, and a quarter mile of 15.6 seconds. Man, how times have changed. I bet you any modern four-door sedan will beat those numbers in today's day and age. I made a claim earlier about the C3 being the spark for the mid-engine Corvette, which I'm glad to say is finally happening. The reason why I said this is because in 1968, Zora Arkus Duntov was appointed as the chief engineer of Corvette, and as many of you know, Zora was the one who wanted to create the mid-engine for the longest time. Well, after Zora took the reins, he continued to push for the mid-engine Corvette. In secrecy, multiple concepts were created codenamed XP882 and 895. As you can see, these cars closely resemble the C3 Corvette design. In 1976, these concepts were eventually called the Aero Vette. The Aero Vette was the first glimpse of the mid-engine Corvette, as it went as far as getting approved for production in 1980. However, since Zora had left the company in 1976, the head honcho at the time decided it would be more economical to continue the building of Corvettes using the traditional layout. Hence, the struggle to get a mid-engine Corvette continues. Zora went on to say that the Aero Vette was his favorite amongst the many concepts that were created. See, the C3 was a bridge to getting to where we are now, and that is on the cusp of the new C8 mid-engine Corvette. As a big Corvette fan, I cannot wait for July 18th to see the revealing of the mid-engine Corvette and to start a new era of Corvette from that day forward. Now that we've gone over this car, let's take it out on the road and see how it drives. so different than a normal car. The first thing you notice are the long hood and these flared fenders that I mentioned earlier. This is very, very different compared to the European counterparts, where the visibility out front is much different. It's much more wide open. Cars like the 911 and the M4 and the Mercedes C63S are examples of those. But it's not to say that the Corvette is bad, as those flared fenders and the long hood are just a part of the experience that you get with this Corvette. Man, listen to that thing. I'll tell you one thing, this thing pulls like a freaking freight train, and it sounds amazing as well. It's got a 2-stage carburetor, so once that second stage really opens up, the hood rises up and you're blowing down the road like nothing. You don't even realize how fast you're going. Man, this thing feels amazing. This engine is unbelievable. It pulls like nothing I've driven in a very, very long time. This car has a modified exhaust. It's got Hedman headers, basically a straight through exhaust with very unrestricted mufflers. And you can hear it sounds really, really loud. And it's got a deep tone, muscle car tone, along with the raspiness that you expect from a high revving engine. So it sounds really, really nice. The owner's done a fantastic job, and I apologize. This car doesn't have a modern suspension, so as much as my camera is doing the image stabilization, I'm just bouncing around here in this interior. But let me tell you, it's something to experience. This is truly unbelievable. Next thing I want to talk about is the steering. This is a 50-year-old car, so this doesn't have any modern power steering like any of the cars in today's day and age. The steering is very vague. It's got kind of loose in the center, but I think that's very expected in a car that's 50 years old with not much steering technology, not much suspension technology. So the brakes are discs at all 4 corners, and it's got adequate stopping power. Obviously, when you compare it to something in today's day and age, it's not even close, even to a standard car, because this does not have power steering, it does not have power brakes, doesn't have any ABS systems, none of the traction control systems, and you feel it when you're driving a car like this. Next, I want to talk about the shifter, and this is a 4-speed shifter. It has long, very, very long throws, something completely different than what a modern shifter is, and you can feel it. The clutch is very, very heavy in this car. It's got an aftermarket clutch, but it is very easy to operate. Somebody who is learning a stick shift, or somebody who's a novice like me, not the best driver, is able to drive a car like this very easily because of that clutch, the center force clutch. And this car's got a lot of torque down low, making it a lot easier to drive for a novice driver. But let's go back to talking about that shifter really quickly. Like I said, it's very loose. It's kind of sloppy when you compare it to a modern manual transmission. And here I am stepping on the brakes a little bit, and I'm really pushing down on this pedal to get this thing stopped. So like I said, the shifts are long. They're kind of sloppy. The shifter isn't very tight, but with all of that, I think this car is absolutely perfect. It offers an experience that you will never get in any modern car nowadays. This car is from an era where you didn't need anything. All you needed was a big engine, a classic design, a 4-speed manual shifter or a manual shifter, and the only thing standing between you and having fun with your car was basically yourself, your right foot. All I can say is anybody who hasn't driven a car like this needs to experience a car from this era, the 60s, the 70s, because these cars will never be made again. It's such an unbelievable driving experience. Just rolling through these gears, that big engine in the front, the double exhaust pipes in the back with the modified sound, the raspiness, the looseness of the steering wheel. I can see what people talk about when they say driving a muscle car is an entirely different experience. and I love this thing. This is unbelievable to drive. That's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to watch our live stream on the 18th when the mid-engine Corvette is revealed. Until next time, drive steady.